This Sunday on Capital Connection, lawmakers prepare to return to Springfield.
The legislature must convene.
How a socially distant legislature will put limits on what politicians can do while they're here. And
the longer this goes on, the shutdown, the fewer businesses will ever reopen.
Business groups prod Governor Pritzker to reopen the economy faster. And Senate Majority Leader Kim Lightford joins us with a preview of what's to come.
I would hate if I came there and spread it to a member who is downstate, who had no impact of COVID, and then they return home infected and share that with their whole family.
It's all coming up on Capital Connection.
From the Illinois State Capitol Rotunda, Capitol Bureau Chief Mark Maxwell is asking the tough questions. This is Capital Connection.
Welcome to Capital Connection. I'm Mark Maxwell reporting from the Illinois State House on this Sunday, May 17. 1 week from this Friday, and all 4 regions of Illinois are on track to reopen or advance to Governor Pritzker's Phase 3, the next step in his plan to slowly restore the state's economy and bring businesses and industries back online step by step. But every day between now and then, the governor faces increasing challenges from members of the public who claim they have a right to civil liberty. And the governor has responded, saying that those businesses may also face civil liability.
Small businesses have rights. Churches have rights. Pastors, it takes boldness to open your church up so that we can praise God. Law enforcement who dedicate your lives and your career to protecting your communities, it takes boldness to stand against a dictator and protect our Constitution.
I would just suggest to all of them that they are putting the patrons of their businesses and the people who live in their counties or in their cities in danger when they simply break the rules, break the law, in fact, and they're, decide that they want to go it alone. We are one Illinois. We are one state. We have 4 regions for the Restore Illinois plan, and soon enough, regions across the state will have the ability to move into Phase 3. There will be consequences because they're putting people at risk. They're making their communities unsafe, and they'll be subject to liability as a result.
And we're back in a moment with a preview of what might happen in the next week of special legislative session with Senate Majority Leader Kim Lightford. That's next.
I've been with Tapman's for 40 years. It's been around for 60 years. And to bring the Tapman name back to the top of the industry is just a pride thing for me. We've gotten so busy, and we want to make sure that we continue delivering the same customer service in a timely manner that our customers expect. The new expansion will allow us to repair more cars faster. We are buying up some new equipment to make sure we stay up with today's technology, but the main thing is for faster customer service.
Hi, I'm Keenan Swanson from the Roofing Dog. You've watched my brother and I grow up on TV through the years, and now I'm happy to say I'm a part of our customer service team. I can come out and meet with you, tell you more about myself and our business, and go over the details of your job. I truly look forward to working directly with you on your roofing project from start to finish. Please consider the Roofing Dog for all your roofing needs. From our family to yours, thank you for choosing the Roofing Dog.
No one ever thinks about their drains until they have a problem. And when that clog happens, you need someone you can trust. At Schoonover Sewer Service, we have top-of-the-line video equipment to locate your clog quickly and take care of it even faster. Whether your stopped-up drain happens at 11 o'clock at night or during a holiday weekend, we're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Call Schoonover Sewer Service today at 239-0106 in Champaign or in Mahomet at 586-3068.
to the road ahead. Trust Toyota to be here for you.
Right now, Toyota is offering 0% financing for 60 months on a new 2020 RAV4. Or you can lease a new RAV4 for $229 a month. You can even shop and buy online from the comfort of your home. Many Toyota service centers are open to help keep your vehicle in top shape and may even offer no-contact vehicle drop-off.
All from the brand you trust today and tomorrow. Toyota.
We are quality residential and commercial fencing, roofing, siding, and more. We are all things exteriors. We are the fence that keeps your kids playing safe in the yard. And the new roof and siding that keeps your home protected from the elements. We are an experienced and professional team that can handle anything you send our way. We are SK Exteriors, installers of quality.
You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
One of the biggest changes to Illinois' economy was already set in motion well before the first signs of the coronavirus started to show up on our shores, and that was a change in the earning power of people in the working class. The minimum wage being raised over a gradual step increase up to $15 an hour by 2025, and that was a big piece of Governor Pritzker's agenda that he passed into law in his first year in office. The lead of that idea in the Senate joins us now, Senate Majority Leader Kim Lightford. She's working from home today in Maywood. It's good to have you with us, Senator. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
I wonder, there have been, in the wake of all of this economic upheaval, as so many businesses and workers are, businesses are laying workers off, they're furloughing people. We've seen more than 1 million people laid off in all of this. But at the same time, we've also seen society be reminded how many workers in our supply chain or in our grocery stores or in our hospitals are truly essential to our process. So in all of this, there are some politicians who have called for suspending or delaying the onset of this $15 minimum wage, especially downstate in some parts of the state. When you factor all of this in the way our world has truly changed in the last 2 or 3 months, does it change your view or does it reinforce your view of that $15 minimum wage increase? How do you view that issue today?
Well, Mark, it strongly reinforces my whole tenure on what I've been fighting for: fair wages, livable wages for those essential workers. I don't know that we had ever given them a title. I just knew that they were so critical and crucial to our everyday living and everything that we do and the companies that they work for, and that they deserve to have fair wages. For me, it's completely a non-starter. The minimum wage increase will continue as the law has set forth. This July 1st will be another increase. And I don't know that my colleagues really want to withhold funds from those who are really out here during this pandemic, making it happen for all of us. I don't understand the rationale to take income away from them, especially at this crucial and critical time.
So on July 1st, the minimum wage in Illinois will jump from $9.25 an hour up to $10 an hour. And there are some saying downstate or other parts of the state shouldn't have to, the employers shouldn't have to bear that extra payroll in the wake of all this pandemic. But you're prepared to have that political fight in Springfield and to defend this law as it is set in motion already.
Absolutely, I am prepared to do so. There were some other suggestions around regionalization for small businesses who we put a threshold of a tax credit of 50 employees or fewer. And there are some members who are saying perhaps if we increase that threshold to, let's say, 200 employees, that could be helpful to some of those businesses. I'm waiting to see that language, and perhaps that's something, a conversation that could be had. But as far as the wage actually taking shape, it's really a non-starter.
And how much of that thinking, perhaps expanding or considering expanding tax credits to those employers, is because of the pandemic? Because we know that this special session has sort of a limited scope. There's still a lot of things you can cover, but one of them is how to find relief for workers and for businesses in Illinois that have seen their customer base vanish, essentially. The economy in many ways grinding to a halt or stopping immediately. So is the pandemic itself opening pathways or avenues to new ideas when it comes to tax credits or other incentives?
You know, I don't know, Mark, if they're new ideas. I just think some of those old ideas that didn't happen are beginning to just brew up all over again. But timing for me is just not good. And for so many essential workers who are out here every single day risking their lives to make sure that you and I and those members who are wanting to stop their resources from happening actually have a livelihood that continues on. Our job is to keep state government moving forward, not to take money out the mouths of people who are really on the front line making things happen. If you're not a doctor, if you're not a nurse, you're still essential to everyday living. Those who are in the hospitals that are cleaning up behind the doctors and nurses, who are in the kitchens doing the cooking, the maintenance, the cashiers. I mean, you name it. If you go out to the grocery store, you need to go to the bank, or you see who the people are. If you have to take public transportation, you know who they are. And so it's really important that we protect those. And when I think of it, I think of those home health care workers and those nursing home CNAs who are dying as well because they're trying to work. They're fighting for hazard pay. And so I just think if we give people a livable wage, perhaps they'd be more prone to continue with what they're doing and feel good about what they're doing and stay on the front line for all of us. So I just think the timing is poor to take income away from those.
What do you see from your corner of the state? A lot of the lawmakers we've heard from, including recently this week, from 7 downstate Democrats who called on Governor Pritzker to expedite his plan to reopen slowly parts of the economy and start to bring industries back online. Many people downstate, many lawmakers downstate look around. They just don't see a lot of their neighbors with these symptoms. Their hospitals are still empty. They didn't ever see that big pandemic surge that they prepared for. It's a different picture in Chicago. What are you seeing from that perspective, and what is life like? How might it be different where there is there has been a bigger outbreak of the pandemic there?
It's a huge outbreak. I was just thinking earlier on how I haven't slept all night. I live within blocks from the Hines VA Hospital and Loyola Hospital, and I hear ambulance it's like every 20 minutes. There's ambulance, and I just keep thinking that's another life, that's another life. And our numbers here are just so alarming. And I think that's because we are more tight-fit, tight-knit urban areas where we're pretty much on top of one another. So I get the difference in members downstate who have more land, more space to spread out. I'm grateful that the pandemic hasn't affected them as much as it has us. I can't imagine if the whole state was in the same position. But we're losing lives daily. That number, almost 200 lives in one day, is pretty, it's almost like I can't believe we're living through these times, Mark. And so I just would hope that some people will have more compassion about what's really happening. It reminds me so much of all these gun debates and all these other political debates around things that shouldn't matter. Right now, I see an invisible killer that has no color barriers in terms of blue and red, but it does have barriers on African American communities and Latino communities and those who have pre-conditioned health challenges, for those who are essential workers, and for those who live in multi-generational homes. And so the impact is significantly greater.
I want to ask you about that because we've heard now in several press conferences from Dr. Ngozi Ezike, the state's Department of Public Health Director, together with Governor Pritzker and some other community leaders, that in fact coronavirus in the death toll has shown up in greater numbers in Hispanic and African American communities. Some have suggested that's because the access to medical care itself over the span of a person's lifetime isn't as equitable for minority communities, and that has led to a bunch of other underlying conditions, and that coronavirus takes advantage of that. Others have suggested that people in minority communities are more prone to have jobs where it's harder to isolate yourself. It's harder to work from home. It's harder to remove yourself from the threat of transmitting that disease. What do you see when you see those death numbers hitting the minority communities especially hard? What lessons or what takeaways do you think there are for us as a state, and why do you think that's happening?
You know, I'd hope as a state that we can take a fair look in resources and addressing needs. It's something that we've been identifying for decades, and I have, that there's institutional racism, there's inequities, there's disparities that impact our livelihood and how we live. And right now we're having this argument over should we stay home to save our lives, or should we open up because some wealthy business people are, their livelihood is in a different direction because they may have to file bankruptcy now, or they're having some economic challenge. Well, we live economic challenges. We live health challenges. We live in work conditions that aren't fair. We're underpaid, and this is generational. It's not something new, but what I witness right now, Mark, is it's all come to the forefront at one time. So you see all of disparities at one time. And I would also say that our younger generation has this huge mistrust in government, that they're not taking it as serious as they ought to, and they're not wearing the proper PPE that they should, and they have grandparents in their home, and they have elderly family members that they're infecting and causing them to lose their lives. So we're in this vicious cycle right now in terms of this pandemic, and I don't foresee an end until a vaccine arrives on the scene. Now, I do want to say on behalf of the governor and his team, I find them to be doing a really good job with giving the resources and given the crisis that we're in. No one knows anything day to day. So we're just trying to figure this out and keep state government turning day to day, keep the legislative process moving. But I think that in looking at the state, perhaps there is changes that could be made, and the more news gets better, the less cases, the less deaths. Of course, the governor's going to reconsider his phases, I'm sure. But he had to be responsible enough to put something out there so we can kind of have an idea and be gauged on where we are. So I support what the governor is doing, and I'd hope that the entire state could take a look at this and realize that there is really no one size fit all. We're on different parts of the state, and when all of us legislators come together in this one building, you're going to have legislators who are sitting in the midst of this with legislators who haven't had any contact with anyone at all. So
yeah, that's an interesting thing, and I think lawmakers have to all take a test for coronavirus before they come to Springfield. Have you been tested yet?
I have been tested, but it was earlier on in the pandemic. I will get tested again prior to my arrival. We were encouraged to be tested 5 days before we arrived, so that's something I'm going to do tomorrow.
And there are some lawmakers who have already suggested the instructions say when you're in session, you got to have a mask on. Some lawmakers have, downstate Republicans in central and southern Illinois have said maybe they won't wear a mask. Should they?
Absolutely, they should wear a mask. If they don't want to protect themselves, be kind enough to protect the people around you.
Should they be allowed into session or in that same room if they don't?
No, they should not.
All right, well, we look forward to covering that from a safe social distance. I think they're limiting to just one pool reporter in the building, and then we're going to have to find our own ways to cover all this debate as it unfolds. So an interesting time on the horizon. Senate Majority Leader Kim Lightford joining us. Thanks for logging on.
Thanks for having me, Mark, and you know how to reach me if you need me.
All right, be well. You too. We're back in just a moment.
Severe weather is the #1 cause of power outages in the U.S. But with a Generac automatic home standby generator from Edelman, you don't have to worry when the power goes out. The generator kicks in automatically, restoring power to your home. And with Generac's Mobile Link app, you can check on your generator wherever you are, giving you peace of mind when severe weather strikes. Contact Edelman to schedule a free in-home consultation and learn how you can save up to $500 on a Generac automatic home standby generator. Make things easy. Call Edelman.
My husband needed hearing aids, and he chose Spelltone. So I thought, well, I'll give them a try, and I love them. Spelltone ranks very high in service. They clean your hearing aids, and it's a monthly service, and Anytime anything shows up, they take care of it. I don't think it could be any better. I'm very happy with Beltone.
Beltone, helping the world hear better.
For countless years, Furniture Row has been your local source for high-quality and affordably stylish home furnishings. And at FurnitureRow.com, you can choose from thousands of sofas, sectionals, and leather, dining sets, tables, and bar stools, bedroom sets, kids' beds, lamps, and accessories, all ready to ship free right to your doorstep. Plus, furnish your entire home with 5 years no-interest financing. Shop the largest selection at the lowest prices guaranteed. Furniture Row, your local furniture specialists.
We are your surface preparation and cleaning specialists. At Oakwood Restoration, our services include expert rust removal, automotive stripping, and all surface preparation. We use a dustless blasting system that can be used on any surface. Cars, bricks, houses, Oakwood Restoration. You name it, we can remove it.
Stock up on spring essentials at Blaine's Farm and Fleet. Right now, we have low prices on must-haves for your yard, home, vehicle, and more. Like Scott's Turf Builder Weed and Feed, just $45.99 after sale and mail-in rebate. Save $100 on this Champion portable generator. Buy 3 tires from top brands like Cooper or Goodyear, get 1 free. Plus, place your order online or on our mobile app and pick up your items in our convenient drive-thru. You don't even need to get out of your car.
Join the WCIA3 sports team. Brett Behrens and Marley Weirda from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign Sports Desk for the best in local sports coverage in Central Illinois on WCIA3. You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Joining us now is Todd Maisch, the president and CEO of the Illinois Chamber of Commerce, representing many hundreds of businesses across the land of Lincoln. Todd, it's good to have you with us. We're just about to begin what is a bizarre and I think unprecedented special session where the legislators return here. Before we get into some of those issues that I know that you'll be watching closely, I want to first ask about this recent push to reopen Governor Pritzker's 28-day plan to graduate to the next phase, this phase 3 of his 5-phase plan to restore Illinois. He's held firm, holding the line, saying we can't start that until May 29 at the soonest. But we're seeing in Texas where bars and restaurants have been open to limited capacity now for 2+ weeks, and still no measure of a spike of transmission or of coronavirus greatly taking off down there. What signal does that give you about what this governor should do in these next 2 weeks?
Well, you don't have to look as far as Texas for a reopening. Look across the Mississippi River to Missouri, where Monday, all of the businesses are going to be open. Kids are going to be playing Little League. Bars, restaurants, all the shops, shopping malls are going to be open. So if you're a business in Edwardsville, Illinois, or anywhere in Madison County that took some pretty aggressive action this week, you're looking across the river and saying they're open. Why are we not allowed to be open? So I think the governor deserves a lot of credit for his leadership. I don't think he deserves a lot of credit for striking the right balance between the public health crisis and the economic crisis that we see. Almost 1.1 million Illinoisans out of work over the last several weeks. We've got to be much, much more aggressive in addressing that problem.
Is there still hope that many of those people who were quickly ejected from their jobs, that they can just jump right back in where they left off? Or do we know yet? Because I asked you this question weeks ago when this was all first starting to come into focus. The markets had just started to quiver and take their first tumble. But do we know now how many of those job losses might be quickly recovered, or how many of them might be permanent?
It's hard to put a number on it, but I can tell you that I'm very confident, talking with dozens and dozens of our members, that the longer this goes on, the shutdown, the fewer businesses will ever reopen and then ever rehire. So every day that goes by is at least some number of businesses that are never going to reopen. So that's why we've called for a revision to his executive order to say, if you can open safely, just like thousands of businesses have been doing from the get-go, whether it's your big box stores or your auto supply stores, If you can operate just as safely as they are, you should be able to open as quickly as possible. That's our plan.
There's been some of this, I guess we can perhaps call it civil disobedience, where there have been some restaurants, I think you alluded to some earlier, especially downstate, who have pushed the envelope, even some local law enforcement and authorities there. How does the chamber handle that? You've got a lot of different types of members, a lot of different types of businesses that look to your group for some guidance on how to interact with the state on these matters. Are you encouraging, are you discouraging any of these businesses from bucking the governor's executive orders?
We think that there are two really stages. The first of all, let's talk about the liability and insurance coverage. Without some kind of local government action to give you a backstop that says, hey, we were allowed to reopen, there's some exposure there. There's no doubt about it. But the other thing is really upon the administration to go ahead and say there's another way forward here. It's clear that we've got a whole bunch of citizens who just don't believe our current stand is appropriate. It's way beyond. And there is legal exposure, I think, to the governor's executive order. I think rather than threatening trial lawyers descending on a business and state troopers descending on a business, he should simply just take a step back, find common ground, and have an executive order that people will be willing to comply with. That's by far the best way to go forward. Saying state troopers and trial lawyers are going to go ahead and punish you, that's not the right way to go. Let's just go ahead and get a common sense middle ground, and people will comply with that. There is no doubt in my mind.
All right, very interesting. Todd Maisch, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us from the Illinois Chamber of Commerce, and a frenzy of activity just on the horizon, but from a safe social distance. So we'll look forward to covering these issues and staying in touch in the days and weeks to come.
All right. Thank you, Mark.
All right, we're back in just a moment.
This is a test of the emergency alert system.
Is your AC system ready for the warm weather? Did it limp through last year's cooling season with persistent coolant leaks or poor performance? Good news, it's tune-up time at Matex Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing. Matex is offering their special 33-point tune-up for only $69, including a refrigerant leak check at no extra charge. That's right, Matex's exclusive 33-point tune-up for only $69 with a refrigerant leak check valued at over $100, but it's for a limited time only. Matex, feel the difference, trusted for over 25 years.
At Washington Savings Bank, we have a mortgage built just for you. Our experienced lenders do more than point you in the right direction. They take the time to help you with every step, whether you're looking to build a house, purchase a home for the first time, or refinance your existing home loan. We're here to help. Visit WashingtonSavings.net for more information. Subject to credit approval, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
While everyone is at home, Bash is open to serve your comfort needs and taking extra precautions to ensure your safety. Bash Heating and Air Conditioning, where your comfort has been our priority since 1952. Schedule your appointment today at bashheating.com.
Classic Granite and Marble is the finest natural stone and quartz destination for builders, contractors, and renovators in Central Illinois. We have the most advanced stone cutting technology and resources available to take your project from concept to finished product right here on site. Our staff knows the industry inside and out and can help you make informed decisions every step of the way. Our commitment to quality and your satisfaction make Classic Granite and Marble the best choice.
That does it for us this week. A busy week ahead. We hope you'll join us right back here at the same time next week. In the meantime, you can catch our full exchanges and interviews up online. For Capital Connection, I'm Mark Maxwell. Stay connected to the Capitol all week. Follow us on Twitter at CapConnectIL or watch reports from our Capitol team on WCIA 3. You can also find us on Facebook or WCIA.com.